Good afternoon. Welcome to the sort of book review of Aesop's Illustrated Fables. This book is, I think it has around 400 or more fables about like sort of fables you must have heard of as a child, but they're pretty like well known, and supposedly they've been written or sort of told by Aesop, which was a Greek slave from around 2000 years ago. It isn't even sure if he existed or if it was just like a made up person, but it's pretty cool because you can just sort of like give this an umbrella name of Aesop's Fables, and some people will know what you're talking about. The way I sort of came across this book was I was reading The 48 Laws of Power of Robert Greene, and sometimes he has these little stories on the side, which it would be one of these fables with sort of like a moral of the story to them. And it seemed pretty interesting because I think there's like 5 in there, but every time, it sort of complied with what he was telling in the story, but it overall was just like a great fable, and it brought me more interested to read into it. So let's just go. I've written down 30 fables, and of course these are sort of like, I guess, my top fables. So I'm just gonna get started with the first one. So the first one is going to be The Wolf and the Lamb. And as I said, you might already know some of these because they're pretty well known, at least, well, for me they are. Because you would sort of get them told as a child before you went to bed, or like from your grandparents. Like these kind of stories, is what you're gonna find here. So The Wolf and the Lamb. A hungry wolf one day saw a lamb drinking at a stream below him and wished to find some excuse to eating her. "What do you mean by muddying the water I am going to drink?" said he fiercely to the lamb. "Pray forgive me," meekly answered the lamb. "I should be sorry in any way to displease you, but as the stream runs from you towards me, you will see that I am not to blame." "That's all very well," said the wolf, "but you know you spoke ill of me behind my back a year ago." "Nay, believe me," replied the lamb, "I was not then born." "It must have been your brother then," growled the wolf. "It cannot have been, for I have never had any," answered the lamb. "I know it was one of your lot," rejoined the wolf, "so make no more such idle excuses." He then seized the poor lamb, carried her off to the woods, and ate her. And the moral being, the wicked always find an excuse for wrongdoing. I'm sure one of you probably has something in the past, or maybe even in like the quite recent past, where you would just sort of get blamed for something which you might not even have done, or it could be anything which you just, the person which most of the time when they do something like this isn't planning on doing something good, still goes through with his plan, even like against your sort of good advice for like, don't do this, because, well, they will still do the wrongdoing for, well, some reason or another. Depends totally on the story, but it could be some psychologically thing, I don't know. But let's get to the next one. The Fox Without a Tail. A fox was once caught in a trap by his tail, and in order to get away, was forced to leave it behind. Knowing that without a tail he would be a laughingstock for all his fellows, he resolved to try to induce them to part with theirs. So at the next assembly of foxes, he made a speech on the unprofitableness of tails in general, and the inconvenience of a fox tail in particular, adding that he had never felt so easy as since he had given up his own. When he sat down, a sly old fellow rose, and waving his long brush with a graceful air, said, with a sneer, that if, like the last speaker, he had lost his tail, nothing further would have been needed to convince him, but till such an accident should happen, he should certainly vote in favor of tails. Guard against those who would wish you to be reduced to their own level. Right. Sounds kind of weird, but the most often times I've had this was when I was gaming with a friend, like video gaming, and they would, for example, fall into a pit. They would, for example, say, "Oh, there's such great loot here, right? So come down as well." And then you would, when you would come, you would probably die there or get stuck there, or some way or another, which actually sort of resembled with the story, which I thought was pretty funny. But of course, there's also going to be real life examples of why you would want to do this, I guess. Next one, Caesar and the Slave. During a visit that Tiberian Caesar paid to one of his country residents, he observed that, whenever he walked in the grounds, a certain slave was always a little way ahead of him, bustily watering the paths. Turn which way he would, go where he might, there was the fellow still fuzzing about with his watering pot. He felt sure that he was making himself thus needlessly officious in the hope of thereby gaining his liberty. In making a slave free, a part of the ceremony consisted in giving him a gentle stroke on one side of the face. Hence, when the man came running up in eagerness expectations, expectation. At the call of the emperor, the latter said to him, I have for a long time observed you meddling where you had nothing to do, and while you might have been better employed elsewhere, you are mistaken if you think I can afford a box on the ears at so low a price as you bid for it. Being busy does not always mean being useful. This story being particularly, like, if you look for this, you can pretty much find it everywhere. The way I found it was in the workforce, so I had an internship, and you would sort of see people pretending to be busy, but if you actually sort of looked into what they were doing, they would sometimes like do the bare minimum or pretend like I don't know why they do it, but I think they get away with it, but eventually it's going to get chopped to you. So don't do this, okay? Next one. The Swallow and the Serpent. A swallow, returning from abroad and ever fond of dwelling with men, built herself a nest in the wall of a court of justice, and there hatched 7 young birds. A serpent gliding past the nest from its hole in the wall ate up the young unfledged nestlings. The swallow, finding her nest empty, lamented greatly, and exclaimed, Woe to me, a stranger, that in this place, where all other rights are protected, I alone should suffer wrong. Do not place too great confidence in outward form. Basically meaning, I wouldn't say, I think at least what this means is you got to do everything yourself, or you can't just trust everyone to follow your sort of, manner of doing things in a way. And you should always take extra measures to protect things which are, I guess, for example, dear to you, but also things, there's always going to be some outward form which you have to be prepared for. You can't just trust people to, not do something bad or wrong or mean to you. So always be mindful of that. The Lion and the Mouse. I'm pretty sure this is one of like the most famous ones, at least from like the first pages. So you might know this one. A lion, tired with the chase, lay sleeping at full length under a shady tree. Some mice, scrambling over him while he slept, awoke him. Laying his paw upon one of them, he was about to crush him, when the mouse implored his mercy. Spare me, O king, said he, and maybe the next day will come when I can be of service to you. The lion, tickled with the idea of a mouse helping him, lifted his paw and let the little creature go. Some time after, the lion was caught in a net laid by some hunters, and unable to free himself, made the forest resound with his roars. The mouse, whose life had been spared, came, and with his little sharp teeth soon gnawed the ropes asunder and set the lion free. The least may help the greatest. Which, of course, I wouldn't necessarily say I have done some small thing and got a nice, what do you call it? Convenience? No. Something like nice to be back. I'm not sure I forgot the word, but when you do something for someone and they do something like great back or even greater back. I wouldn't sort of necessarily that I've had that, but I did realize it with myself is when you do some small things which might help you or someone else, it might actually help them to another level or yourself to another level. For example, doing something small every day may help and turn into greater things later on. So now we go to Aesop at play, which is just a small one. An Athenian once found Aesop joining merrily in the sports of some children. He ridiculed him for his want of gravity, and Aesop good-temperedly looked up at the bow, unstrung it, and laid it at his feet. There, friend, said he. That bow, if kept always strained, would lose its spring, and probably snap. Let it grow free sometimes, and it will be better fit for use when it is wanted. Wise play make wise work. The moral story I got out of this story was basically it's always good to sort of take some rest, and you can also, of course, overdo it. But if you're working yourself to like a burnout, that's not going to be helpful either way. You're going to be an inconvenience to yourself and to others if you get into something like that. But when I was at holiday, I would sort of follow this course for a certificate in cybersecurity. And I would sort of go at it all day and night. Well, not night, but like most of the day. But then I had to go on holiday with friends. And I think I was about gone for like 10 days. But when I came back, I actually had so much more energy to start again. And it wasn't that when I was at holiday, I was thinking about, I want to go home. I wasn't having, how do you call it? I wasn't missing it, sort of. But I did have more energy when I came back. And I sort of looked into it. And it turns out it's better to go on short holidays for short whiles. which actually gives you quite a great amount of sort of energy back to you, which you can sort of use to, get back to your work or do the thing you like, or could be even with anything. For example, also with sports. So I've got a friend who, when he joins with playing sports, he's just really tired all the time. And I think it would actually be great for him if he just stopped for like a week, just find or sort of see if he still likes it. And if he does, we'll just come back and sport again, All right. The tortoise and the eagle. A tortoise, weary of crawling about on the ground at a snail's pace, desired to fly in the air like the birds, and gave out that if any birds would take him up in the clouds and show him the world, he would tell them in return where to find treasures he hid in the earth. The eagle thereupon did as he wished, but finding that the tortoise could not keep his word, carried him up once more and let him fall on the hard rock, where he was dashed to pieces. Never make rash promises. And what I see, what I've happened was you would, be in like quite a happy mood, and someone would ask something, you're like, yeah, sure, I can do that. Sure, of course, let's do it tomorrow or something. And when tomorrow comes, you realize you can't. Well, you probably can come back on your promise, but it's quite easy to just, make some wrong promise which you can't actually make. So one sort of, it's a weird example, but still sort of handled to this one, is I had to drive my friends to with the car to a friend because they're gonna do a get together there. And I promised someone on the way to that place, well, you can sit in the front, like I don't mind, okay. And then I sort of forgot about it on the sort of gathering, and someone else asked, which was also in the car, well, I can sit in the front, right? Because I was sitting in the back on the way here. And I was like, yeah, sure, I don't mind, but I just forgot, and I sort of made a rash promise to them both. And what ended up happening, they would actually sort of ended up in the fight, which, well, it ended up great, but sure, it could have been prevented by me because I promised that, basically, right? It still could have happened, but I could have done something about it. All right. The flying fish and the dolphin. A flying fish, being pursued by a dolphin, swam for the safety into shallow water. Seeing the dolphin still after him, he came too far into shore and was thrown by the waves high and dry on the sand. The dolphin, eager in pursuit and unable to stop himself, was also stranded. The flying fish, beholding the dolphin in the same condition as himself, said, "Now I die with pleasure, for I see my enemy has met the same fate. Revenge is sweet." One, I guess, weird example which could kind of be perceived as mean was that I would have a test in school, and one person was constantly looking at my paper, and I think what ended up happening was the teacher thought I was cheating. So I had to I think I had to come afterwards, or had to make the test again, and I got a 1, I think it was. And that person was sort of grinning, like, you got busted. Well, I literally didn't do anything. And that person turned out to just get it, he could still make the test, but he also got a 1, which honestly felt better than just me getting a 1 or him on his own getting a 1. It would have been better, but, revenge is sweet, and it always feels nice. Well, it sounds kind of mean, but it always feels nice. Well, not always, but most of the time. Depends on the scenario, but it's pretty great. So, the envious and the covetous. 2 men, one a covetous fellow and the other thoroughly possessed by the passion of envy, came together to present their petitions to Jupiter. The god sent Apollo to deal with their request. Apollo told them that whatsoever should be granted to the first who asked, the other should receive double. The covetous man forbade to speak, waiting in order that he might receive twice as much as his companion. The envious man, in the spitefulness of his heart, thereupon prayed that one of his own eyes might be put out, knowing that the other would have to lose both of his. Envy shoots at another and wounds itself. So I kind of like this one because this sort of reminded me of some people who see you thrive in, for example, something you're doing in your life, right? And what they would do, they instead of like themselves working and improving themselves, they would sort of sabotage you in a way because, well, they're envious of you because you do something better, or you have something better than what they have, or like, I don't know, something along those lines, right? And the other thing you could do is just work upon yourself and improve yourself. That's what I would like more than you just sabotaging me, because it's just turning things around, right? Which sort of brought up these emotions when I read this one. Next one, the wind and the sun. A dispute once arose between the north wind and the sun as to which was the stronger of the two. Seeing a traveler on his way, they agreed to see which could the sooner get his cloak off of him. The north wind began and sent a furious blast, which, at the onset, nearly tore the cloak from its fastenings. But the traveler, seizing the garments with a firm grip, held it round his body so tightly that the north wind spent its remaining force in vain. The sun, dispelling the clouds that had gathered, then darted its genial beam on the traveler's head, growing faint with the heat. The man flung off his coat and ran for protection to the nearest shade. Mildness governs more than anger. And I think this one sort of brought up, well, first of all, I recognized it because I used to watch Exerbia. It's like the turtle guy thing. And he would actually sort of animate this one. And this was actually like a resemblance directly to The Wind in the Sun Fables. But also because, well, if you look at this and sort of, I guess, get the moral out of the story with this one, it's always better to govern with mildness. Well, not always, but in most cases, than with anger. For example, if you have to teach your child something, it's probably better if you do something with mildness instead of anger, because they might do it, but they might do it in fear of you, which wouldn't prove like a to be like a real bond, right? I guess, which could also be similar to when you're training someone or whatever it is that you're doing. Right. This is the follow-up. Oh, this one should be. Wait. Okay, this one is fine. This one should be like this. So, this is quite a long one, but I did like it. So I'm just gonna read it out. The lark and her younger ones. A lark who had young ones in a field of wheat that was almost ripe was afraid lest the reaper should come before her young brood was fledged. Every day, therefore, when she flew away to look for food, she charged them to take notice of what they heard in their absence, and to tell her of what it was when she returned. One day, when she was gone, they heard the master of the field say to his son that the grain seemed ripe enough to be cut, and to go early tomorrow and desire their friends and neighbors to come and help them reap it. When the old lark came home, the little ones fell quivering and chirping around her, and told her what had happened, begging her to remove them as fast as she could. The mother bade them to be easy, for, said she, if he depends upon his friends and his neighbors, I am sure the wheat will not be reaped tomorrow. The next day she went out again, and left the same orders as before. The owner came and waited. The sun grew hot, but nothing was done, for not a soul came. You see, said he to his son, these friends of ours are not to be depended upon. So run up at once to your uncles and cousins, and I say I wish them to come betimes tomorrow morning and help us to reap. This the young ones in a great fright reported also to their mother. Do not be frightened, children, said she. Kindred and relations are not always very forward in helping one another. But keep your ears open, let me know what you hear tomorrow. The owner came the next day, and finding his relations as backward as his neighbors, said to his son, Now, George, listen to me. Get a couple of good sides ready against tomorrow morning, for it seems we must reap the wheat ourselves. The young ones told this to their mother. Then, my dears, said she, it is indeed time for us to go. For when a man undertakes to do his business himself, it is not so likely that he will be disappointed. She at once removed her young ones, and the wheat was reaped the next day by the old man and his son. Moral being, he who would have things well done must do them himself. And I just kind of like this one because, like, my father and mother own each of their own company, and so they have employees, right? And of course, they do a lot of things good, but with a lot of the times with employees, you ask them something and it doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen in the way it was supposed to go. And you could blame the teacher, so to say, as to something that went wrong. But in most cases, it's just someone's ignorance or incompetence of doing the right job, which would, of course, be, well, whatever it is that is desired. And there's just a lot of incompetent people in the world who are either too lazy to do something the right way, or just don't know how to do the right way, or just are frightened of like doing something for example, which, would improve them or improve the job or would do something out of spite of someone. So there's a lot of things. So if you would just do these things yourself, it's unlikely that you will get disappointed, right? Right. No, I think I kind of liked it. I think it was a pretty cool one. So yeah. This one is about the bottom one. So the dogs and the fox. Some dog once found a lion's skin and were worrying it with their teeth. Just then a fox came by and said, "You think yourselves very brave, no doubt. But if that were a live lion, you'd find his claws a good deal sharper than your teeth." Moral being, it is easy to act brave in the absence of danger, which, I guess speaks for itself, right? It's just a lot of the times people act really brave. For example, also the thing you see with when bullying happens. So they act really kind of brave. But then when someone sort of higher up comes, which could punish them or whatever, they will just act brave. They wouldn't act brave. They would just act normal, which does kind of make you out to be sort of, I wouldn't say weakling, but it's just why, right? Why? Yeah. Next one, the fox in the well. An unlucky fox, having fallen into a well, was able, by dint of great efforts, to keep his head barely above water. While he was there struggling and sticking his claws into the side of the wall, a wolf came by and looked in. "What, my dear brother," said he, with affected concern, "can it really be you that I see down there? How cold you must feel. How long have you been in? How come you to fall in? I am so pained to see you." All these questions. "Do tell me all about it. In the end of a rope would be more of use to me than all your pity," answered the fox. "Just help me to set my foot once more on solid ground, and you shall have the whole story. Saying well is good, but doing well is better." And I see this especially a lot of the times when, for example, someone says they don't feel that well, and they would feel just some sort of extreme pity. For example, yesterday I had a friend. He was just okay. So this is a bit of a different story, but he would just he would want to hear pity because he's so sad or whatever, right? He wanted to hear it. So sometimes in these cases you have to say something which I don't like because in the end it will be better for them. But for some people, it would be just so much more helpful to help them instead of saying, "Oh, that's so bad for you." For example, my grandparents actually have it a lot of the time. So I think my grandpa was having some troubles with his, I think it was, with something. I'm not sure what it was anymore. But the thing was, everyone would say, "Oh, it's so bad for him, whatever." But no one would help. Oh, sorry, it was actually my mother's uncle, I think it is. Yeah. So, so what would happen is everyone would be like, "Oh yeah, he's so sad because he can't properly walk anymore, and he needs sort of ramp to get into his house," and no one would help. So that's kind of a thing. Like saying well is good, but doing well is better, right? Just in those cases. All right, and then the next one is the hawk and the farmer. A hawk, pursuing a pigeon with great eagerness, was caught in a net which had been set in a cornfield for the crows. The farmer, seeing the hawk fluttering in the net, came and took him. The hawk besought the man to let him go, saying piteously that he had done him no harm. "And pray what harm had the poor pigeon you followed done to you?" replied the farmer. Without more ado, he wrung off its head. "Do unto others as you would have them do to you." And there's going to be some sort of similar fable like coming in here, which is basically that you can't trust a man until you are in his position of power, or something along the lines of that. It's good that we're going to come across it. But it's basically, well, if someone would do something mean to you, it's you could stand above it and not do the same thing back to them. But at least in my case, I think we'll always feel some kind of repulsion when someone does something, for example, mean to you. You want to do something back. It might not be in physical form or what kind of form it is. But just remember for like the next time you meet them or come across them, well, they have done something like, bad to you. And of course, a lot of people don't have the bad things in for you, but some people are just like mean and they're sort of the rotten stock of humans. And just remember it for next time. Like you shouldn't cooperate with them or whatever it is. Like it depends on your situation, of course. But I guess that's the thing I would advise against. The old man and deaf. I believe it is. Yeah. Poor and toil-worn peasant, bent with years and groaning beneath the weight of a heavy faggot of firewood, which he carried, sought, weary and sore-footed, on a long and dusty road to gain his distant cottage. Unable to bear the weight of his burden any longer, he let it fall by the roadside and sitting down upon it, lamented his hard fate. What pleasure had he known since first he drew breath in this sad world? From dawn to dusk, one round of ill-requited toil. At home, empty cupboards, a discontented wife, and disobedient children. He called on death to free him from his troubles. At once, the king of terror stood before him and asked him what he wanted. Awed at the ghastly presence, the old man stammered out, I only wanted you to help me put this bundle of sticks on my shoulder again." Moral being, what is desired in fancy is often regretted in reality. And this one sort of made me realize that, like, when I was really young, it was something to do with I swapped present with someone, I think, or it was my sister. No, wait. Yeah, it was something I really wanted, which I think I wanted. And when I actually got the thing, it turned out to not be that great. And I think it was something along the lines of like Skylanders, like the Wii game. And it wasn't, well, it was regretted because I was playing it. And I was like, well, I kind of feel too old for this game now because I found it really cool when you had to pre-order, like it was the swap thing or something. And I actually sort of regretted it because I had to pay it out of my own pocket, which, well, I fancied it in the beginning. It's not as bad as this man had with the with death itself, but yeah, it was sort of my example, which came out of it. The Crow and the Raven. A crow was very jealous of the raven because he was considered a bird of good omen and always attracted the attention of men, as indicating by his flight the good or evil course of future event. Seeing some travelers approaching, she flew up into a tree, perching herself on one of the branches, called as loudly as she could, and then the travelers turned around towards the sound and wondered what it boded, when one of them said to his companions, "Let us proceed on our journey, my friend, for it is only the call of a crow, and her cry, you know, is no omen. Those who assume a character that does not belong to them only make themselves ridiculous." And I have a lot of, like, my example with this one is people who just act way too cool and think of themselves so highly that it looks so out of place for them. And it just makes them look ridiculous. And it's also with someone who thinks they're really good at doing something, and then they, for example, show it. Of course, you could think, well, okay, I could do it better, but that's different. These people actually assume a sort of character or a role and think they're so good at it, but it just makes them look ridiculous. And it's different if you look at things like having confidence in something. These people want to be something which they are not, and which I'm pretty sure they don't feel comfortable in, like, by even being that person. So I guess that. Not even sure if this was supposed to be on like the 100th, so 100 or 200, but it looked about right, but I'm not sure anymore. The geese and the cranes. A flock of geese and a covey of cranes used to feed together in the wheat field, where the grain was just ripening for harvest. One day the owner of the field came up and surprised them. The cranes were thin and light and easily flew away, but the geese were heavy and fat, and many of them were caught. Many criminals go unpunished. Is the moral, but I kind of like this one. I wasn't sure what to think of the moral, but at least the thoughts of which came into my head were, like, you could be the person doing something wrong and you could go unpunished, but it could just as well be that you're not even doing something wrong and you could get punished. Like, I'm not sure what the cranes were doing or what the geese were doing, but that's at least the sort of reason which came into my head, which I kind of liked. I guess it's not I'm sure it's not the correct reason, but that's the one I liked. The Tortoise and Hare. This one is one of the most, like, I would say, recognizable stories because everyone has sort of seen this or heard this one. The Hare one day laughed at the Tortoise for his short feet, slowness, and awkwardness. "Though you may be swift as the wind," replied the Tortoise good-naturedly, "I can beat you in a race." The Hare looked at the challenge as a great joke, but consented to a trial of speed, and the fox was selected to act as umpire and hold the stakes. The rival started, and the Hare, of course, soon left the Tortoise far behind. Having reached midway to the goal, he began to play about, nibbled the young herbage, and amused herself in many ways. The day being warm, she even thought she would take a little nap in the shady spot, for she thought that if the Tortoise should pass her while she slept, she could easily overtake him again before he reached the end. The Tortoise, meanwhile, plodded on, unwavering and unresenting, straight towards the goal. The Hare, having overslept herself, started up from her nap, and was surprised to find that the Tortoise was nowhere in sight. Off she went at full speed, but on reaching the winning post, found that the Tortoise was already there, waiting for her arrival. Slow and steady wins the race. Of course, like I said, almost everyone knows this, and I wouldn't say it's a boring story, but just the recognizable one. And especially the moral as well. If you put in the consistency instead of how do I say it? Yeah, just pure consistency in something that you're doing, you will get there in the end. Like whatever is that is your goal, if you truly set your mind to it, which I guess is true. As of this point, I'm not sure what my end goal is, but for the sort of small goal which I have in the midterm, which is about 3 months, I think I'm gonna get there. And this happened to me with most things that I wanted. If you just put in like the work, and of course it depends on every person how much work you need to put into it, you will win the race eventually. The sheep and the wolf and the stag. A stag once asked the sheep to lend him a measure of wheat, saying that his friend the wolf would be his surety. The sheep, however, was afraid that they meant to cheat her, so she excused herself, saying, "The wolf is in the habit of seizing what he wants and running off with it without paying. And you too can run for much, much faster than I. So how shall I be able to come up with either of you when the debt falls due? Two blacks do not make a white." Honestly, the first time I read this, I thought it was kind of a weird moral, I would say. But what I thought about at that moment when I read it was that you could do something wrong, or you could try to do something, and then someone could point out that you also did this wrong in the past, right? And it doesn't make your wait, how can I explain this? It doesn't make your wrong right. Wait. Yeah. So no. It doesn't make someone else's wrong right whenever they point out that you also did something wrong, which at least was the thought that came into my mind when I was thinking about this. It's probably not the one, but yeah, whatever, I like it, so I'm just keeping it if that's the Sportsman and the Spaniel. A sportsman ranged the field with his gun, attended by an experienced old spaniel. He happened to spring a snipe, and, almost at the same time, at the same instant, a covey of partridges. Surprised at the accident and divided in his aim, he fired two indiscriminately, and by his means missed them both. "Oh, my good master," said the spaniel, "you should never have two aims at once. Had you not been dazzled and seduced by the extravagant hope of bringing down a partridge, you would probably have secured your snipe. We often miss our point by dividing our attention." And this one is about like a small book I read, which was Hyperfocus, and they talk about like how you have sort of attention bubble, and you can fill it with circles. And the most optimal way is not having many small circles, but having one big circle, basically pointing out that you can only point your attention at one spot. And honestly, I believe that would sort of be the case as well. And it's also something that if it's in the back of your mind, for example, my sister now, she has her driving exam in 3 days. And when she has to do other tasks, she's still stressing about her driving exam, which is basically taking away attention for the things she's doing at the current moment for something that, is going to happen in the future, which you can't even do a thing about. And I'm not sure how you would overcome this, but it's just something you see happening quite often, like people worrying about something which they, of course, have no control of. And it would always be better not to do two things at once. Well, maybe if you're really good at them and you have to wait for one process to finish or whatever. But yeah, that's just, we often miss our point by dividing our attention. The fox and the lion. The first time the fox saw the lion, he nearly died of fright. The next time, he gathered sufficient courage to have a good stare. The third time, he went boldly up to the lion and commenced a familiar conversation with him. Familiarity breeds contempt. And this is something I've realized like a lot of times when you're doing something. Like, let's say you're throwing in what I had at least was I started hockey, playing field hockey, and I started like 8 years later than all of my friends. So first of all, it was quite bad, right? Because naturally, you're not going to be good. Everyone has to practice. You might have some skill, so you might acquire these skills faster. But like out of nature, you're not going to be able to like play perfect the first moment you touch it. You have to put in the work and hours. But the thing was, I did want to become like better, and eventually after 2 years I surpassed my friends, and I was thrown into sort of like the selection group of the field hockey one, which at first I thought I wasn't able gonna make it because they were so much better than me. I was like, well, okay, I can't do anything here, like what am I doing here? But eventually, when you train with people which are better than you actually get faster to that level, right? Instead of you having to stick out as one of the better players and pushing yourself. And the same thing that's happening, I guess, sort of to me now in the field of cybersecurity. So I'm following the certificate, so CPTS, and I'm having to do a lot of the sort of tasks which other people have done as well. So you can look at walkthroughs and whatever. But when you practice with people which, have skills and are good at things, you learn things quicker. And of course, you can also eventually get to the same goal. But I think it would really help if you have, for example, a good mentor or other people who sort of play at the same level. The young man and his cat. This one should be together. No, not should be. Oh, no, sorry. It's below here. Okay. The young man and his cat. A young man became so fond of his cat that he made her his constant companion, and used to declare that if she were a woman, he would marry her. Venus, at length, seeing how sincere was his affection, gratified his wishes, and changed the cat into a young and beautiful woman. The young man was delighted, and lost no time in marrying her. They lived happily together until one day when the bride heard a mouse in the room. Quickly springing up, she caught the mouse and killed it. Venus, angry at this behavior, and seeing that under the form of woman there was still hidden the nature of a cat, determined that form and nature should no longer disagree, and changed her back again to a cat. The true nature, though hidden, will assert itself. And sorry that I'm going into what I thought of this fable again. But you see this a lot of the times when people, whenever they're trying to, for example, help you, but they would sort of point you in a way, for example, also the only way they think is right for you, for example. And it could even be that they're pointing you in the wrong direction, or something that's not right for you, or something that might be good for you, but which is in the end not like it could be any reason. But if someone wants something, he could use other people and try to act all natural and trying to be a good friend, but he could sort of turn out to be a hidden sort of mean person thingy, which will assert itself in some ways. Let me see. This is the one? The Man in the Stone, I think. Aesop was sent one day by his master Santis to see what company were at the public bath. He saw that many who came stumbled, both going in and coming out, over a large stone that lay at the entrance of the bath, and that only one person had the good sense to remove it. He returned and told his master that there was only one man at the bath. Xanthus accordingly went, and finding in full people, demanded of Aesop why he had told him falsely. Aesop replied that only he who had removed the stone could be considered a man, and that the rest were not worthy of the name. A man is judged by his deeds. Which, honestly, I'm going to leave it at that. Pretty great moral. Could be true. I've seen some cases. I guess, yeah, it could be. The Crow and the Mussel. A crow, having found a mussel on the seashore, took it in his beak, and tried for a long time to break the shell by hammering it up on a stone. Another crow, a sly old fellow, came and watched him for some time in silence. "Friend," said he at last, "you'll never break it in that way. Listen to me. This is the way to do it. Fly up as high as you can and let the thing fall upon a rock. It will be smashed, then, sure enough, you can eat it at your leisure." The simple-minded crow did as he was told, flew up and let the mussel fall. Before he could descend to eat it, however, the other bird had pounced upon it and carried away. Beware of interested advisors. Which, you see this with a lot of people. They see something in the thing you're achieving or trying to get in for them, and they will, point you in the wrong direction or do anything they want to also gain something of your, whatever it is that you're doing. And I can imagine a lot of people, when they have, for example, a friend who has, a company or whatever, he's doing good, and that someone will try to help you, sort of, but either try to bring you down, or also see something for the share of them in the thing that you're trying to achieve. So that's at least what my thought was when I read it. But yeah, let's go. It is this one. A violent storm uprooted an oak that grew on the bank of a river. The oak drifted across the stream and lodged among some reeds. Wondering to find these still standing, he could not help asking them how it was that they had escaped the fury of the storm, which had torn him up by the roots. "We bent our hands to the blast," said they, "and it passed over us. You stood stiff and stubborn till you could stand no longer. Stoop to conquer." And I believe stoop was something along the lines of just slow down or move with the current, or something like that, like along these lines of warfare. and it's kind of similar to something I would have read in Art of War, where they would also say, move as a fluid between your enemies or something like. It's too long ago for me, but the moral is great. The Cormorant and the Fishes. Yeah, this was great. The Cormorant and the Fishes. Cormorant and Fishes. A cormorant whose eyes were so dim with age that he could not discern his prey at the bottom of the waters, devised a trick to supply his wants. "Hark, you friend," said he to a gudgeon. Gudgeon? No idea what it is. Whom he found swimming near the surface of a certain canal. "If you have any regard for yourself or your brethren, go and once and tell them from me that the owner of this piece of water means to drag it in a week hence." The gudgeon immediately swam away and made his report in this terrible news to a general assembly of the fishes, who anonymously agreed to send him back as their ambassador to the Cormorant. He was to return their thanks for the intelligence, and to add their entreaties that, as he had been so good as to inform them of the danger, he would be graciously pleased to put them into the way of escaping it. "That I will, most readily," replied the artful Cormorant, "and assist you with the best service in the bargain. You have only to collect yourself together at the top of the water, and I will undertake to transport you one by one to my own residence at the side of a solitary pool, to which no creature but myself ever found a way." The project was approved by the unawary fish, and quickly performed by the deceitful Cormorant. When he had placed them in a shallow piece of water, the bottom of which his eyes could easily discern, they were all devoured by him in their turn, as his hunger or luxury required. "It is not wise to trust an enemy or stranger so far as to put yourself in his power." And this was the quote I was talking about, and my bad for sort of mispronouncing a lot of these words, because I'm realizing that my mouth is getting kind of dry, so I'm just going to continue to the next one. Overturn the pitcher. Oh, no, I missed information. Well, this one is about a crow who badly wanted some food or water, but it was in the bottom of the pot, and he would fill it up with stones, and the rule essentially being necessity is the mother of invention. And a lot of the times, at least, which I think is pretty cool, when you have something, it was sometimes out of some inconvenience someone had, and he would introduce something. But most of the times, when you're in dire need of something, you will invent and find a way to sort of fix your issue. And I actually see this with myself quite a lot when I, for example, had a test, and I would need to study a lot, which was actually not able to, be done in that short of a period of time. I would still find a way. So you would sort of use another way, or you would, if you had to do something differently, so you would achieve your goal or write something differently, all those things. It's just, there was a necessity to get something done, and you did it because of one way or another you invented, which I think was pretty cool, and something that actually happens, well, oftentimes, I think. The Fowler, the Partridge, and the Cock. One day, as the Fowler was sitting down to a scanty supper of herbs and bread, a friend dropped in unexpectedly. The larder was empty, so he went out and caught a tame partridge, which he kept as a decoy, and was about to wring her neck when she cried, "Surely you won't kill me. Why? What will you do without the next time you go fowling? How will you get the birds to come to your nets?" He let her go at this and went to his henhouse, where he had plump young cock. When the cock saw he was after, he too pleaded for his life, and said, "If you kill me, how will you know the time of the night? And who will wake you up in the morning when it's time to get to work?" The Fowler, however, replied, "You were useful for telling the time, I know, but for all that I can't send my friend supperless to bed." And therewith he caught him and wrung his neck. In times of need, people reveal their true regard for others. Well, this story, of course, or I guess this moral, you can sometimes see it when, it's something truly one can do, for example, or one person can achieve a certain spot. It's not even about the competitiveness of something like that, but the people you thought were your friends will turn up on you if there's something for them to gain, which is too greater than the friendship you would have attained if you didn't do this thing. Which I guess is sort of the moral, maybe. The Wolf and the Horse. A wolf coming out of a field of oats met a horse and thus addressed him. "I would advise you to go into that field. It is full of capital oats, which I have left untouched for you, as you are a friend, the very sound of whose teeth it will be a pleasure to hear." The horse replied, "If oats had been the food of wolves, you would never have indulged your ears at the cost of your belly." The deceitful reveal the true motives in the illogic of their schemes. which is kind of similar to the one of being. Let me see what it was. Well, it was about the person who revealed their true intentions. Beware of person with own intentions. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. But oftentimes, like when you truly look at something or someone and he's appointing a plan, they will sort of reveal some things which are so illogic as into their schemes. And oftentimes, when you're playing something, well, this is a weird example, but you have a board game where you have to pretend that you're from the other team, and it's not Among Us, but it's just a board game. And sometimes they do things which are so illogic in the end scheme that they just reveal themselves. So there's a certain degree to something to sort of road you can take to try to get to the point you want instead of the one they think you want, which is the wrong one in the logic scheme. Jesus, I can't talk anymore. Okay, let's finish this one. The two rats. A cunning old rat discovered in his rounds a most tempting piece of cheese, which was placed in the trap, but being well aware that if he touches it, he would be caught. He slyly sought out one of his young friends, and under the mask of friendship, informed him of the price. I cannot use it myself, said he, for I have just made a hearty meal. The inexperienced youngster thanked him with gratitude for the news, and heedlessly sprang upon the tempting bait, on which the trap closed and instantly destroyed him. His companion, being now quite secure, quietly ate up the cheese. Do not listen to every passerby. With this one, I sort of had to think about a lot of hate comments people get, for example, on whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. That if you would listen to every passerby there is, you wouldn't get anywhere, because a lot of people don't know the thing you're talking about because, for example, you have more experience or you're just better at something that like you're doing. And of course, if you listen to every passerby, you will probably get nowhere because there will always be haters and lovers and whatever it is there in between, right? So don't listen to every passerby. And this was actually basically the book. These were just my top 30, I believe 30 of the book. And I think it was a pretty great book. And there's more of Barnes and Nobles, which is the sort of, I think they just mainly put together some child stories, like also Alice in Wonderland and those things. But this one was pretty great, and I actually really liked it to read. So, thank you for listening, I guess.